I'm so glad that you're here with us, and I want you to know that I long to be close to you. I really do. And I want to tell you that we are in the red tier, and so we are moving a little bit closer to being together again. And so we are going to be putting together a welcome team so that we really begin to think about how we want to come together again. Not to rush back to what used to be, but to really step into our newness. So if you are interested in being part of that welcome team, I hope that you'll join us. Please reach out and let us know. That would involve greeting, and it would involve being part of the team that helps us to really stage our sanctuary as we come forward again. So we are indeed in this place of open to possibilities. That is the theme for this month. And the spiritual practice that we're using to really support that theme is visioning. What I know about visioning is that it's a practice that moves us beyond our best ideas and our strategies so that we can be in that beautiful, receptive state where we can do that deep inner listening and we can catch the greater good that wants to come by means of us. We're really creating a container, and visioning is a mystical practice that's not just a mental practice. Mental practices will only get us so far. It is the mystical practices that allow us to really be on that, dare I say, evolutionary edge so that we can really hear that whisper of our higher wisdom self and the whisper of the divine that wants to have an experience by means of us. Holmes has this to say about it, and this is from the general summary in the textbook, Science of Mind, and our founder, Ernest Holmes. If we believe that as isolated personalities we are able to heal through mental and spiritual methods, we shall be likely to fall into the error that it is human will that accomplishes the desired good. He goes on to say that our human willpower will someday tell us that it no longer has the strength to keep on doing the good work, that it is tired, or that it is no longer has the inspiration to continue. And I don't know about you, but after a year of Sundays of being in this pandemic, it was a year ago this Sunday that we were all asked to stay in our homes and to shelter in place. And it is, if I am only working with my human will, well, my human will has said several times, I am tired. I am tired of being on the computer. I am tired of not being with my friends. I'm tired of not being able to socialize. I'm tired of not being able to go to concerts. I'm tired of not being able to walk out in the world feeling free. Holmes goes on to say that if we are swayed by the opinions of others or by the belief that we are not yet ready to help others, then we are falling under the illusion that we are using an isolated power and do not understand that which really heals is the knowledge that the spiritual person is already complete and perfect. And so Holmes is reminding us that there is indeed a power for good in the universe greater than we are, and that we can use it and it can use us. And so when we look at this idea of visioning, that the visioning is this practice that helps us to engage surrender. It helps us to release, to let go, to put our best thinking and our strategies to the side so that we can really tap into something new that wants to be known by us, that wants to happen by means of us. And so sometimes when we're visioning, we can, our mind, our busy mind, maybe it's just me, maybe it's just my busy mind that wants to get in there with all kinds of, good ideas and the ways I can fix things. But the practice of visioning is to put that aside and do some really deep listening. When we can begin to engage in a conscious practice, we can begin to tap into the deeper knowing that already resides within each one of us. And oftentimes, at least it was my experience, that without having a practice of some sort to engage in this mystical listening, I would often have to reach that brink of heartache or tragedy or really challenging circumstances before I could break open to something new, something better that wanted to happen in my situation. I remember I had my first child when I was 19 years old. And I was single and pregnant. I wasn't yet sober, although morning sickness really protected my unborn child. And I was ready to move in with a friend and get on public assistance so that I could take care of my son, who I didn't know whether I was going to have a boy or a girl at the time. And I remember going to bed absolutely heartbroken in my situation. I knew that this life that was in me wanted to come through, and I had no real support. And I went to bed desperate and crying and praying. And the next day when I woke up, everything shifted. There was some kind of surrender that happened within me that made me available to my greater good. But I had to be on that brink, right? That place where I couldn't hold on any longer, and my best thinking wasn't going to get me there. I will tell you that that little baby that I had, his name's Jonathan, and he's 40 years old now. And he probably saved my life. It wasn't long after having Jonathan that I found some recovery from my addictions, and my life really changed. Its whole trajectory changed, and it changed for the better. And I know we all have stories like this. What's your story? What are the stories where you weren't awake yet, and things happened, and some kind of falling apart happened, and yet it happened to be one of the best things that happened in your life? I want to remind you of that power of surrender that really makes us available to something that we could not have imagined. My best thinking had me on medical assistance and welfare, raising this child in the inner city with another friend. And everything changed when I surrendered, and I moved in a completely different direction I couldn't have imagined. So what I know about visioning is that instead of waiting to that moment when our heart breaks open, or things fall apart, or we get to that place of, surrender or die, we begin to engage in a practice that opens us up to that same power that carries us through those crisis moments to that better yet to be. And so as we practice visioning this month, I'm going to invite you to do this throughout the month. And we did a little visioning last Sunday, and I want to remind you of the questions that we asked, because visioning, if you didn't see last week, visioning is a practice of asking some very open questions and then listening for the answer. And sometimes, if you're like me and you have a very active mind, you have to listen for your ego or your best thinking self that wants to come in and come up with some really great solutions. And we continue to wait so that we create that container for deep inner listening. And sometimes the listening brings forth ideas, sometimes it brings forth imagery, sometimes it brings forth nothing, like it's just creating enough stillness in you that later on, either through maybe a dream you have, or running into someone, or picking up a book, that some insight comes forward. And when we practice visioning, we're really open to greater possibility. And so the questions that we like to ask ourselves are, what is God's highest idea for us in whatever situation we're bringing the visioning to? What is you could change, if God is a term that you're uncomfortable with, you could change that to, what is love's highest idea for me? What is Spirit's highest idea for me? What is Spirit's highest idea for our center? What is Spirit's highest idea for my relationship? What is Spirit's highest idea for my health? You can use that deep question to really begin to listen to what wants to happen by means of you. The other questions that we ask are, what is it that we need to release so that highest vision can come forward? And then we look at what is it that we need to embrace for that highest vision to come forward. And a third question that I like to ask, is there anything else I need to know so that this highest vision can come forward by means of my life? And today, you can tell from the talk title, Release and Let Go, we're really looking a little deeper at that release step. And I talked a little bit about how we tend to hang on to try to fix things, to try to manipulate things or strategize to get things the way we think they need to be, because that's the American way, right? We pick ourselves up from the bootstraps and move on. If you don't know what bootstraps are, if you look at a pair of cowboy boots, there's two little loops on either side. And so the idea is that we pick ourselves up and move on. But that's not visioning. I am reminded of a movie that I really loved. It was a 2004 biopic about a guy by the name of Frank Hopkins, and he was part Lakota, and he was a dispatcher for the U.S. Cavalry, and he carried a great burden of guilt because he had been the dispatcher that delivered the orders to the U.S. Cavalry that resulted in the massacre of Lakota Sioux Native Americans at Wounded Knee. And so this westernized, movieized biopic of Frank's life really talked about the story of redemption. Frank was led to he had this beautiful horse that he rode, and it was the fastest horse in anywhere nearby, and so he was invited into this long-distance race in the Arabian desert. And the reason the movie comes forward for me is because there's this point in the movie where Frank has given all his best skills. He's in this long-distance race with his horse, and he's thirsty. He's in the middle of the desert. There's nobody around for miles and miles. His horse falls down. It's almost dead. And this is the point that he surrenders. This is the point that it all falls apart for him. And I remember watching that scene, and I was like, oh my God, I've been there so many times where I had to exhaust all of my effort before I was ready to surrender. And in the movie, when Frank finally surrenders, it is his Lakota spirit ancestors that come forward and lead him to safety. And it is his Lakota ancestry that redeems his soul, if you will. And it is, if you haven't had a chance to see Hidalgo, it's a beautiful film, and it really does talk about how connected we are. But when we're busy rearranging the deck chairs and trying to figure everything out, like, we are not available to that power and that presence that wants to move through our life, as our life, for some greater good. And I want to tell you that oftentimes that greater good is not just your private good. It's often a good that's going to benefit lots of people. It's going to benefit the people that you influence. You're going to have an impact on the world when you allow yourself to be used by that creative process that wants to express in the world by means of you. And yet we have this human condition. Until we're awake, we keep bumping up against those experiences that try to wake us up. And without practice, without deliberately and consciously stepping into surrender, we'll often find that the road ahead is a little bumpy. There's several obstacles, and all of those are really just meant for us to open up. Because when we surrender, on the other side of surrender is true freedom. And I have another quote from that same section in the Science of Mind textbook from Ernest Holmes, and he says, "Ignorance stays with us until the day of enlightenment, until our vision towards spirit broadens and casts out of the image of a no longer useful littleness. The will should hold in place until the creative genius of the inner life transforms the image of limitation and transmutes it into liberty." I'm going to read it a second time. This is a really beautiful idea to remind us. Ignorance stays with us until the day of enlightenment, until our vision toward the spirit broadens and casts out the image of a no longer useful littleness. The will should hold it in place until the creative genius of the inner life transforms the image of limitation and transmutes it into liberty. So Holmes is talking about that useful littleness that we hang on to, right? Because that's our way. We're supposed to figure things out. That's our useful littleness. But it isn't until we let go of it that we can step into that creative genius. When we release and let go, we let our minds loose so that we can let go of an idea of loss or limitation. If oftentimes when we hear the word surrender, when we hear the word let go, it brings up ideas of loss, doesn't it? Or limitation. But we're not talking about that. What's on the other side of release is freedom. We just need to get out of the way to experience it. My next door neighbor, her name is Mary Louise, and she's 93 years old. And Mary Louise, I really hope that I'm as sharp and as available as Mary Louise is at 93. She's an amazing individual, and she had a health issue and has needed to move into assisted living. And I was feeling a great deal of compassion for Mary Louise. She's been a wonderful neighbor, and I texted her this morning, and I was just loving her and telling her how much I was thinking about her and this big transition into her new home. And she responded in such a beautiful way. She thanked me for my concern, and she let me know, in her words, life is easy here. Life is easy here. And I thought, oh my God, when we get on the other side of surrender, life is easy here. When it's not easy, you haven't surrendered. Just so you know, in case you were wondering what the sign would be about whether you stepped into that place of surrender or not. Life really is easy here. And so I'm going to invite you to really embrace this idea of surrender and letting go and releasing, that it isn't about giving up. You know, my place, when I texted Mary Louise this morning, I was thinking about all the things that she had to let go of in her home to move into this assisted living place. I was heartbroken. She had a beautiful home. She was an artist. She left, you know, her family was sharing her artwork with the neighbors. You know, she was letting go of so much. But the truth is, she was stepping into a grace and a simplicity and an ease that's available to all of us when we're ready to just let go of it all and surrender and trust. So let's do that now, shall we? I'm going to go ahead and we'll do a spiritual mind treatment, our affirmative prayer, and then we'll have some more music from the couch choir. So I anchor myself in my heart, for I know it is the heart that is the alchemist that allows me to be deeply connected to that one presence that is all available, that permeates all life, that is everywhere present, and uniquely available to me and to you and to everyone who is willing to raise their awareness to it. So I claim right now that each one of us raises our awareness to that place within ourselves that has never been harmed, that has never been hurt, that has never been abandoned. That the truth is that we're all carried by this grace. And so I know as we move through this week, as we move through this month of being open to possibility that we trust, we use that thing called faith to allow us to walk out whatever it is that we are walking out. It may be fatigue of the shelter-in-place orders. It may be and the way the world is. It might be something that's going on for you right now in your life. But what I know for you is that at the very core of your being, you are free. At the very core of your being, you are held. You are held by that creative process, the very thing that made up the DNA and all the physicalities of your body, the thing that breathes you, the thing that beats your heart, the thing that keeps the sun and the moon and the stars in the sky, is the same power that we're surrendering to. It absolutely knows. It absolutely knows your perfection. And it absolutely loves your expression. So on this March morning, as we mark a year of Sundays of not being in the world the way we're used to, I absolutely trust and surrender to this most creative power that wants to have its expression in a myriad of ways, as you, as me, as each other, as our community, as our state, as our country, and as our world, and even beyond. And so all I have to do is let go and trust. And so I know for each one of us that that let go, that process of surrender is gentle and powerful and carries us through our next yet to be. It is with a grateful and surrendered heart that I speak this highest truth. I know this for each one of us, and I simply let it go, knowing that it is the law, that it is that power and that presence that simply makes it so. I do not have to force my breath to nourish my body with oxygen, and I do not have to force the world to establish myself or to experience my greater good. I simply let go. In gratitude, we anchor this by saying together, and so it is.